On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we discuss why it's probably easier at this point for the Minnesota Wild to just stop taking penalties than it is to actually try to fix their penalty kill.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, it is a Sota Pod-sized Friday. As Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joins us, we're going to talk about penalties and special teams here today, taking a look at why the penalty kill continues to let the Minnesota Wild down, and the volume of penalties maybe has more than a little something to do with that. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, credentialed Wild media member, and as mentioned, a Sota Pod-sized Friday for you. Isha Jahromi joining us from the Sota Pod. Isha, we're still taking in what was a disaster for the most part against the Los Angeles Kings, 6-rip, and still trying to kind of put the pieces back together. But glad to have you back on, and we're thriving, we're surviving here.
Thriving and surviving. Yeah, it was tough, especially it being a West Coast game, because we all had to stay up for that absolute onslaught. And, we could sit here and rip on everything the Wild did poorly in that game. And, there's a little bit of puck luck to it, as well as just there were some bounces that didn't go the Wild's way. Like, I don't want to blame either the goaltenders, because I don't think it was necessarily their fault that we lost the game. Yeah. And we got to give some credit to the Kings, as like some of their top players, like Byfield, probably one of the best games that I've personally seen Quinton Byfield play. Kopitar looked like, a blast from the past, like the Kopitar who was giving me nightmares as a Canucks fan almost a decade ago, right? So I feel like everything went right for the Kings. Everything kind of went wrong for the Wild. But on that same token, Seth, we can't make excuses for the special teams.
Yeah, like it just continues to be a just common thread for this Wild team. And I know they got the power play goal against the Anaheim Ducks, but they're
a power play goal against Anaheim.
Yeah, congratulations. The power play's in just a massive rut. It's something like 2 out of their last 28, I think it is. But the penalty kill has been bad all season. Like, we're not breaking any ground. We didn't have solid footing at any point this season for this penalty kill. And the Los Angeles Kings pick up a couple of power play goals in that Thursday night game. And so it's to the point that in the open, we kind of alluded to this, like it's the point that I think you have to take a real hard look at why this continues to happen. And we've seen players come in and out of the special teams units. We've seen schematic structures change. We've seen goalies have a variable effect on how good or bad the penalty kill is. But I think the thing that is most commonly, like the most common variable through this penalty kill stretch is the penalty minutes. And I know the number was skewed because of the fact that the Wild ended up with 79 penalty minutes, because at the end of that game, there was a tussle, there was a skirmish, and so the refs just decided, all right, we're going to send people to the showers early. You get a 10, you get a 10, you get a 10. But the Wild now third in the NHL in penalty minutes at 864. They are never going to catch the Anaheim Ducks, who have 977 penalty minutes so far this season. But Isha, this is something that has popped up over the last few years. If you go back to 2019, 2020, Minnesota Wild were 19th in the NHL in penalty minutes at 560 in 69 games. You go a year beyond that, 2018, 2019, they were 20th with 656 in 82 games. But over these last four seasons, 2020, 2021, they were 13th, had 498 in 56 games. And then these last three seasons in particular, 2021, 2022, they were third in the NHL with 882 penalty minutes. 2022, 2023, they were 7th in the NHL, 925. And now this year again, they're third with 864 in 70 games. Isha, it's a volume problem for this penalty kill. Like, if we want to boil it down to the main issue for this, it's a volume issue. They're just simply asking this penalty kill to make saves far too many times.
Yeah, no, they've been undisciplined, and it's not just Ryan Hartman, although he is the key factor. He's the one you circle as like, okay, you're the one taking more stupid penalties than the rest. But Zuccarello's, he's up in penalty minutes in the last 3 years. I think he's I can bring it up here in a sec. Even Eriksson Ek is up there as well. And I know he plays hard, he gets into some skirmishes, but like, fighting aside, Seth, so penalty minutes taken right now, fighting excluded, they're at 622. So I mean, that's still that is the players shooting themselves in the foot right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, Zuccarello, let me just take a look at it right now. He's at 28 this year, whereas he was at 26 in 78 games, 24 and 70 before. Only 8 in 2020, 2021 in those 42 games. And he's a guy who, like, yeah, you'll see him take a tripping penalty every now and then, but that's pretty much like the extent of it, right? Whereas up and down the roster, it seems like every player who's not a fighter, you know, because Foligno, he's not taking as many stupid penalties, right? His penalty minutes are up there because he's dropping the gloves. But it just seems like even like Eriksson Ek, even those who we lean on a lot, are shooting themselves in the foot this season more than any season. And could it be attributed to the inconsistency in the lineup, given all the injuries and frustration and things like that? Absolutely. Like, there's a reason the Ducks are up there. They're the worst team in the National Hockey League. I'm guessing that most of those penalties come later in the game, right? When frustrations boil over, when you're just gonna, I'm just gonna spear you or trip you or, employ the lazy play because we're already out of it anyways. Like, I understand that, but there's no excuse for a team like the Wild who are fighting tooth and nail for a spot in the playoffs, which after that loss to the Kings, according to Money Puck, which is my new favorite site, by the way, now, they only have a 6.4% chance of making the playoffs. And let me tell you, from a Canucks fan who lived in Vancouver for many, many years before covering the Wild, you have anything under 10 and you ain't making the playoffs. It's not happening.
It's Jover.
It's not happening.
And it's like, we're going to expand on this quite a bit because there are wrinkles to this, but you hit it on the head. It's like, and it's magnified in these big games against, because guess what? Like, just gonna drop a little truth bomb in here. These playoff caliber teams, the thing that they all have in common is that they are really good on special teams, but they're also really good on special teams and not just insanely penalized. Like, let's go to, like, the Colorado Avalanche are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th in the NHL in penalties, but they're at 644. So they're 200 full penalty minutes lower than the Minnesota Wilds. And like the Dallas Stars, least penalized team in the NHL. Vegas, second fewest penalties in the NHL. Winnipeg's in the bottom 10. And
which
so
that's crazy. If you like from the outside, if you would have, before we did a deep dive into stats, if you would have told me that Winnipeg is, is right there, I wouldn't have believed you given how tough they play, right? But they play discipline.
Yep.
They're rats, but they play discipline.
And that's the key difference is you play. It's okay to be physical. Like I'm not trying to say like you have to play the style of hockey that precludes physicality. Like I'm all for that because you need to do that to be able to slow teams down, especially if you are the far less skilled team than some of these teams are. You got to slow them down somehow, but you have to do it in a smart fashion. And we see it time and time again with this team, like tripping penalties, and the team that you're playing scores on the power play like 10 seconds later. The Dallas Stars, how many power play goals do they have against the Minnesota Wild this season alone? Like 8? That's what good teams do, is they take advantage of players getting put in bad situations and thus trying to overcompensate with a stick or a grab or interference, and then they make you pay for it. We've seen this done the last 2 postseasons to the Minnesota Wild in almost identical fashion.
Well, and you know who are 2 names that surprised me the most in regards to penalty minutes? Marco Rossi has 45 in 70 games, and Matt Boldy has 44. Those are 2 guys that they cannot be in the box, and they cannot take stupid penalties because you're just, like I said, you're just shooting yourself in the foot, and those are bad habits, especially for someone like Marco Rossi, who's newer to pro hockey than that of Matt Boldy.
Yeah, bad habit is that's 100% it. It's just it's not taking the extra second to put yourself in the right position, or the other thing that we're not seeing done a ton is simply live for the next play. Like if you get beat to a puck, don't make it worse. Like just live.
Leave your stick out of it. Yeah, like, leave your stick out of it.
Okay, a player got to a puck and is going to have an opportunity to get to the net before I can get there. Don't make it worse. And if you're intentionally taking a penalty to prevent like a breakaway or something like that, like a 2-on-1, you take a penalty to prevent like a. I'm not even counting those because this is not going on in these cases. Like it's just every level of like getting beat and then making it worse, compounding the problem.
Yeah, and I have a little bit more of an understanding for a defenseman because you're having those board battles and you're back skating and look, you're going to take a trip. You're going to lose a board battle. You're going to be too aggressive. Now, I'm not saying that like boarding cross checks or anything are good things that I condone them for the team, but like you're mucking it up way more, especially in your own zone. So like naturally we see defensemen usually with more penalty minutes. But again, other than Middleton and Bogosian, but shoot, even Bogosian 59 and 50 in 51 games, like Middleton's at 77, man. Like, come on. And then you look at the forwards though, like the 2 young guys I mentioned, like there's no excuse, man. When most of the defensemen on this team aren't even at that yet, other than the 2 big boys.
Yeah, it's not great. And that's one side of it too. Like I said, there are many layers to this because the goaltending is another thing too. And I've got some stats that are going to highlight because I think I've had a lot of people that have asked like, well, how was this penalty kill good last year? Well, I'll tell you why. It had to do with the goaltending. So we'll continue our penalty kill dive on today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure for your second listen, you check out the full array of offerings from the Sota Pod, whether it be MNCAA, whether it be Judd's Buds, whether it be Sota Pod episodes, Fellowship of the Rinks. Sota Pod's got you covered, so make sure to drop them a follow after you're finished listening to today's episode here. And you can find my appearances on Mondays. So a lot to offer from the Sota Pod. And Isha, let me hit you with a stat bomb here that I think is gonna blow your mind a little bit.
He refused to share it with me before the show, by the way. So I'm just like, I'm on the edge of my seat, just like you guys listening and watching right now.
So there was, I think, a consensus that the Minnesota Wild's penalty kill was actually decent last year. And it was in like the 80%. So it wasn't, 74% this year is hideous. Like it's not great by any stretch. The Wild last year were at 82%. So actually they were a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They were 7th best in the NHL last year. That can't be right. They were in the top 10, I believe, just by looking. Listen to this. In terms of save percentage on shots on goal last year, just total save percentage on shots on goal, the Minnesota Wild were 6th best last year at 88.37%.
Thanks, Gustafson.
On unblocked shots, so those shots that just get straight through, 91.46% for their goalies in 4-on-5 situations. This year, get ready for this. The save percentage on, where did it go? See, you'd think I would have just left that alone, but no, I was trying to find something else. Save percentage on shots on goal. The Minnesota Wild are 9th worst this year at 85.68. So 3% drop in saves on shots on net. Unblocked shots, save percentage for the Minnesota Wilds, they are currently 8th worst at 89.87. So that's a 2% drop from last year to this year. If you want a reference point, the Los Angeles Kings this season, their save percentage on shots on goal on the penalty kill is 91.99%. That's number one in the NHL. And on unblocked shots, they're at 94.47%.
Wow.
So penalty kill 82% last year, because whether it be Philip Gustafson or Marc-Andre Fleury, they were making the saves. And as much as the special teams has suffered this season because of the drop in goaltending, that has carried over to the entire team, because we have not seen consistent performances from Philip Gustafson. And so it may sound simple, it may sound cliche, but your best penalty killer is your goalie. And so if your goalie's not making the saves, it doesn't matter who you have out there. And a perfect example of this, the overtime goal against the Colorado Avalanche in that game, because I believe the Avs had a penalty. The Avs had a power play in overtime in that game. And Philip Gustafson was in net. And Zach Bogosian was out there, and I don't recall who the forwards were. But the Avs ended up scoring, and after the game, people were like, well, you should have Jonas Brodin as your penalty killing defenseman out there. If you look at the play, though, it was an initial shot that hit Gustafsson and kicked out. He fully extended with his stick to try to bat it away. Couldn't get it. And the Avs were able to get to the puck before Zach Bogosian did and just buried it.
Yeah, like, it doesn't matter who's out there at that point. It's happening so fast. It doesn't matter how good of a backward skater Brody. He's not getting to that puck. You know, that's a goalie decision, right?
Yeah. And it's like it is something else that I think we have seen a ton this year, and there really isn't an answer for it. Is how many times do you see at least one player for the opponent in front of the goalie? Like an opposing player in that area in front of the net, which you should, as the penalty killing team, you should own that area. Like that should be a no-fly zone for your opponent. And yet it seems like more and more Wild opponents are owning that part of the ice. And if your goalie doesn't make the initial save, the rebound kicks out, there are guys there to ram it home.
Well, and shoot, even I know we're talking penalty kill here, but that's something the Wild have been struggling with on 5-on-5 too. Is they either lose the crease battles or they're not even fighting. There's no one there clearing it out. It seems like, or if there is someone, they're getting pushed aside easily. It's crazy, and it's crazy to think about given his stature. But you know who was so good at owning that spot was Spurgeon.
Yeah,
he's not here, and look what's happening.
Yeah, it is. You know, I don't think that's by coincidence because, like, I'm going to go back because, you know, another thing that we're going to do on this show is like these key moments in which if you're going to get to the end of the season and say, geez, we missed the postseason by 6 points, I can count them up for you. And one of the games,
which games too, and the Avs is one of them.
The Avs is one of them. Another one in which kind of helps hammer this point home, that Buffalo game where the Wild had the lead with a minute to play and Buffalo goes extra attacker. There were 2 Sabres players in front of Philip Gustafsson just hammering away at the puck. Not a single Wild player in frame. Like, that has been an area in which the Wild have just struggled all season to own. You got to own that area in front of your goalie. You got to help your goalie out. And they just have not been able to do that this season.
That loss to the Ducks in January, what was it? 3-2 or was it 3-2 or was it 4-3? That was a 1-goal game too. We're like, dude, they had them. They had them in their grasp.
And that, you know, I'll give Ryan Hartman credit there because Troy Terry had just been in the box serving a penalty. He springs out of the box. There was some sort of there was a weird change, and Terry gets behind the defense, and Hartman goes to the front of the net, blocks the initial shot, but then there's nobody else there to control the rebound. It goes right back to Troy Terry, and he doesn't miss the second time. Like, the area in front of the net has been a huge issue that has cropped up on special teams too, but like, again, if you're getting to the end of the season and scratching your head as to how we got here, like, this stuff has been there all season. Like, it's been written on the wall by the door, and every time you leave your apartment, you look at it as you're leaving, and penalty kill, not owning the front of the net, too many penalty minutes. Like, these things have all been there the whole season.
Well, and regardless of, you know, take away for a second how tough it's been for the penalty killers and even for like the power play, we're talking special teams. If you take a penalty, that obviously diminishes your time 5-on-5, gives you less of an opportunity to win the game. So regardless of how bad they are, like, you're shooting yourself in the foot when you give up a goal, obviously on the penalty kill, but you're taking away time to give Kirill, give Boldy, and give those who are actually providing offense to this team a chance to score, because Kirill's had no issue scoring this year. I mean, there was a little bit of a lull early, but as soon as he's come back from being banged up, if he's on the ice, he's making stuff happen.
Yeah.
You're doing him a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice by the volume again coming full circle of penalties this year. And again, that's if you're a good penalty kill team, then it's like, okay, we can stomach that. But you got to imagine that John Hines is just like freaking out right now at this point. I know he's still a new coach, but like he's been around enough now where it's like, okay, this is beyond what I can do at this point. Like, you guys have to be better.
Yeah, it honestly kind of boggles the mind. And we'll spend a little bit of a short segment to kind of finish the show here, looking at some areas that I think if we just like some things that you got to commit to, I think for the rest of the season, the results are going to be inconsistent, but they've been inconsistent all season. And it's some things that I guess I just would like to see going forward. So we'll finish up by just looking at some areas, at least from a penalty kill perspective, that maybe can be tweaked.
And I have one perhaps hot take or maybe a drastic move that could wake this team up too. But we'll save that for the other side.
Okay. We'll finish. That is a quite the tease. We'll finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, say goodbye to busted brackets, or in this case, say hello to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed to roll all the way through, it is time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My suggestion, if you took advantage of the first 4 games and had that be your $5 bet, you're hopefully rolling with bonus bets here the rest of the way. What I would do is just look at tomorrow's slate of games, close your eyes, throw a dart at a dartboard, and just pick a team. That is the best part about March Madness, is the insanity is completely unpredictable. So just pick a team, pick them by the mascot, pick them by you want to see a 15 seed knock off a 2 seed. You could end up with bonus bets if you cash in on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topol joined by Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod. And Isha, we're getting to the point of the season too where it's wish list time. Like we're going to be thinking more and more about the future here as this season unfolds. And it happened against the Kings. I was intrigued by it. And I'll be honest, I didn't notice it a ton until after the game. Murat Huznadinov got some penalty kill time, and I would be highly in favor of seeing that, but also just seeing some other players get an opportunity. Like this is another big theme that has gone on this season, is the assumption that guys can't do something without really giving them the opportunity to try it. And look, Joel Eriksson-Ek, Marcus Foligno, those are your 2 probably best defensive forwards. And so it's probably not realistic that they're going to be taken off that unit between now and the end of the season. So I'm not even looking at that area per se. But like Murat Huznadinov could come in, he could be your second pairing, your second group forward
out of it and put Murat there.
That's
easy.
The thing is, like,
or Hartman, take Hartman out of it and put Murat there.
And honestly, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this for a PK2? Huznadinov and Rossi. Like, Rossi is physical enough. He probably isn't. He maybe doesn't have everything that you're looking for from a penalty kill standpoint. But they're young, and they're gonna try hard out there. Yeah, they're probably gonna get beat here and there, But I would like to see some of these. I'd like to see some of these guys get an opportunity just to see if they're capable, because that's the other thing too, is like, it just feels like with this penalty kill unit, it's the same 4 guys. And I know you're transitioning because you got rid of arguably 2 of your best penalty kill guys at the trade deadline. But that's a perfect opportunity to see if there are other guys that can handle it, because you're going to deal with injuries. And if you have no plan for what to do when key guys get hurt, or as we alluded to early in the show, if your key penalty kill guys get called for penalties, like, you gotta have some flexibility and some contingency plans for how to handle it. Because you can't just, like, if Eriksson Ek takes a penalty, you can't just say, they're probably going to score on this. Like, we'll just give him the power play goal and get him right back on the ice. Like, you got to find a group. You got to find a group of forwards that can get it done. Like, penalty kill has to be a priority.
I love Murat on there because, dude, in the KHL, like, we've seen tape on him be very defensive. He's very much a two-way guy. And Z was talking about this on the recent Judge Buds episode as well. Like, he's not projected to be a top line center in the National Hockey League or a top line guy. He's projected to be a middle guy who plays that two-way game, that good shutdown game. And, like, take his stature, take his size out of it. We've already seen him pick people's pockets in his first game. Mm-hmm. Right? He was credited with, like, at least it was like 2 or 3 takeaways in that game. So he definitely has the skill to do it. He definitely has the awareness to do it, and he definitely has the toughness to do it. Now, Rossi, what I'm scared is, like, he has a little tenacity to his game, which is obviously why he's taking some of these penalties as well. My worry, to push back on your take there, is that his wires would cross a little too much, and that he wouldn't be focused on the task at hand. Like, there'd be other voices in his head, right? And maybe he'd get in his own way a little bit in that front. Now, that's my opinion. I would love to hear, comment on YouTube, comment on the video if I'm out to lunch there. I think that's something that they could certainly entertain, in training camp next year, the beginning of the year. I don't see the coach doing it right now, because from what I've seen, it's just, I don't know if he has that. I don't even want to say confidence, but I just don't know if he's ready for that burden yet. Yeah. But at this point, like you said, like, we just need more bodies in there. And if it's Murat over Goudreau, like, sign me up 100%. But that's the key thing, is, like, who else is there? Like, you're not putting Zuccarello out there, right? So it's like, you're not putting Boldy out there as big as he is, right? Because he's one of the bigger players on the team. He's one of the stronger players on the team. Like, that's just not his game. But no, Murat, I really like that. And Rossi, like, I'm indifferent. It's just I don't know if he gets in his own way yet.
If I had to pick two, if we were going to get Rossi on one of the special teams units, power play by a mile. Oh, so like, keep him on that unit. And, again, it's probably something that you're not going to be able to fully address until the off season, but I do like giving Murat the opportunities just to try to see if he can crack it, because
it's part of his game. Yeah, the defensive part. Whereas Rossi, like, I'm not saying Rossi doesn't have any defensive part in his game. I'm not saying that, guys. What I'm saying is, like, we haven't really seen it yet. Yeah, and His wires do cross in the sense that, like, he's not going out there and, like, fighting people, but you definitely see the frustration, right? And it reflects in his games, when the team is not doing well.
And I had somebody ask me this on Twitter, and I will answer it here because it is a good question, but I think the answer, I think the question kind of answers itself, because I had somebody ask, why don't they do 3 defensemen and a forward on the penalty kill? And I think it comes down to simply clean, like, changes. If you've got 3 defensemen and a forward, you run the risk of having somebody get caught on the ice that shouldn't be there, and then compounding a power play and turning a 5-on-4 into a 5-on-3.
Right.
So I think that's the reason we haven't seen that done regularly. Is just to try to keep things focused on killing the penalty as opposed to who's in, who's out. to that extent. But, you know, I would like to see too. I'd like to see in the off season, because I'm of the belief that I think there are going to be some changes made. I would be fully on board with bringing somebody in that can offer you, maybe somebody on the younger side that has a little bit of penalty kill acumen to them, just to throw in and maybe be one of your top 4 PKing forwards. But
yeah, who can play fourth line 5-on-5 or third line in a pinch, but who is there as a specialist for the PK. And those players exist.
They do.
And that's on management and scout and pro scouts to find those pieces.
Dang.
Right? That's why you have a freaking pro scout in the National Hockey League, is to identify those niche talents on other teams and then make the moves to acquire them and or sign them via free agency.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in full agreement there. Ultimately, it comes down to volume. That's really the name of the game here. Is if you are more disciplined in your play, then you can put the PK away. Definitely did not try to make that rhyme. You can probably tell I kind of hesitated a little bit because I'm like, am I really going here?
I don't know if you guys know this. Actually, Seth's actually a tremendous battle rapper, but I've seen it.
It's been a minute. So I was just a little rusty on the.
Well, I've seen it, man. That night at Cowboy Jacks.
Oh boy, yeah. We don't speak about that. At least by name. It definitely happened, but. Yeah.
Okay, let me throw some at you before we end the show here. I mean, at this point in the season, again, what was it? 6.8% of making the playoffs at this point. Does the coach? Does John Hines, does the team, do they send a message by scratching key guys who are causing this entire conversation? Do they scratch those like Hartman? Do they scratch those like Middleton moving forward? Because I could see an argument, not necessarily in the same game, because but to send a message, I'm sorry, you're taking stupid penalties. You're not fighting in the boards and getting caught up with the trip here. No, you are intentionally getting your stick around for holding when you shouldn't be doing that. And in Middleton's case, like you're one step too much, right?
Yeah.
Do you send a message to the room at this point? Because and just say, look, like this has to stop. I don't care, playoff picture or not. For how this team is going to continue to play and for the players who are going to be here next year, like, do you not send a message by being, these are the two guys. I don't care if Middleton's one of the better defensemen on the team, because he has been proof in the pudding. And Hartman has been, Hartman's going to Hartman. He's going to put 40 to 50 points, 40 to 60 points, but still be that rack up. But do you send a message and go, this is one of the key things that are sinking us right now, that's losing us games. Do they send a message by being like, sit down? I mean, the captain of the friggin' Flyers was scratched the other night and they won the game.
Yeah, and I have to say too, like, I'm going to go on record here and say that is one of my favorite decisions of the season by the Philadelphia Flyers. A coach that has the stones to sit his captain because he's not happy with how he's performing on the ice.
Best coach in the league right now, not even close.
Hands down. And honestly, like, this will be another off-season topic, but I think this Wild team needs some of that. I think they need to be held accountable when these sorts of things happen.
I love that. Held accountability right now for this team is key. Gustafsson, we love you. You need some tough love. Hartman, you need to be slapped across the head and be like, wake up, dude. Stop it.
You can't take 4 penalties in a game.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Yeah, and we saw it not consistently enough under Dean. Like, I remember he did bench Hartman for a game because of penalties.
Respect. And that's why I brought it up, because it's happened before. And what happened after? He came out a little bit more disciplined. And if anything, correct me if I'm wrong, but did his offensive production not start skyrocketing after that?
I think that was the point in the season last year in which he hopped back onto the top. It
woke him up.
Yeah. So that's all it takes. And look, these guys are professionals. Like, there's pride involved here. And if you end up getting sat down because you are playing in a way that is detrimental to the team,
100%.
like, you don't mean if Philadelphia can bench Sean Couturier, if they can healthy scratch him, you mean to tell me that you can't do that to a guy like Marcus Johansson too, and just say, look, your performance has not been where it needs to be. Like, accountability, there needs to be a real shift towards accountability with guys on this team going forward. And so I love that take. I would do it if it were me. And it's something that I think this coaching staff and this franchise should look at a little bit in the offseason heading into next year. So we'll see, but I think that's a perfect spot to leave things here for today. For our Sota Pod sized Friday, Isha, thanks for hopping in here today. Listeners, make sure you follow the Sota Pod on your favorite podcast platforms. Give them a follow, give them a subscription on YouTube, and we'll continue to keep you up to date on Minnesota Wild hockey here throughout the rest of the season. Of course, my weekly appearance will be Monday. We'll talk about we will have a lot to talk about, I'm sure, by Monday. So appreciate having you on as always, Isha. You know, we could sit here for 4 hours and just talk Wild hockey, and it would be an absolute blast. And someday we probably will do that again. But listeners, make sure to stay up to date with everything Minnesota Wild related here at Locked On Wild. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.